and get started. I will turn it over to Kristen, but if you're just joining us, we're asking you to practice using the chat box by typing in the question. Hold on, am I sharing the right presentation? Yes, okay, it was a different question on my set of slides. So I'm going to just take that out so we don't get confused. But what is the weirdest question or the weirdest food you've ever eaten? So go ahead and put that into the chat box, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So Kristen, take it away.
All right, welcome everybody. So if you have webcams, we ask that you turn them on so that we can see you. And if you're getting feedback or weird noises, it might help to turn off your computer speakers. And also just a note, if you don't have a reliable microphone on your computer, you are also able to call in using the telephone. Next slide. All right, okay. So the lectures are going to be recorded. So if you're not available during our normal meeting times, or if you have to leave early, those recordings will be available after the session and they will be posted on our website. And we'll be sending follow-up emails after each lecture with a link and a reminder. Next slide. Okay, now that we've got the logistics out of the way, I would actually, sorry, hang on. Okay. So for the web session etiquette, if you're using a phone, make sure, yeah, thank you. We're a little out of sync there. Okay, so now we've got the logistics out of the way, I'd like you to welcome to the Adaptation Planning and Practices online course. We've offered this course since 2016 for forestry-focused natural resources professionals who work in rural and urban areas. And your course leads will be myself, I'm Kristen, as well as Patricia Leopold and Aaron Wilson. So I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, also called NRCS. I'm based in southeastern Indiana, and I recently worked as a liaison to the Northern Forests Climate Hub. My work involves linking climate adaptation approaches to NRCS conservation practices for forests and farms. Patricia Leopold works for NIAX as the coordinator for the Climate Change Response Framework in the Central Appalachians and Mid-Atlantic regions, and works with land managers and planners to incorporate climate change into their work. We're also joined by Aaron Wilson. He is an atmospheric research scientist with a joint appointment between the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center and OSU Extension. Aaron focuses on the intersections of weather and climate with agriculture, engaging the community on climate change awareness and adaptation. And we would also like to start today by offering a land acknowledgement. So we'd like to acknowledge the ancestors of the lands that we gather on today. And the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science understands that traditional and indigenous knowledges and perspectives are not often recognized in Western land management activities, but those knowledges can play an essential role in helping all of us understand how to adapt to change. So we are partnering with tribal organizations and community members to provide climate adaptation resources, which you can find on our website. And I think Patricia is putting that link in the chat. So we're here representing various organizations, and we know that all of you are also representing different groups. So we're just trying to create an inclusive environment here. So the course that we are talking about today was developed by NIAX. Our organization is led by the Forest Service and is funded primarily through 3 branches of the Forest Service: the Northern Research Station, Eastern Region, and the Northeastern Area State and Private Forestry. Our steering membership also includes Indigenous, industry, and academic collaboration to address scientific and management needs in the fields of climate and carbon. We provide practical information, resources, and technical assistance related to forests, farms, and climate change. Much of our work centers on helping natural resources managers make climate-informed decisions. So NIAX runs the Northern Forest Climate Hub for USDA, and this is a specialty hub that is related to the Northeast and the Midwest hubs. So why do we need a specialty hub? Well, the Northeast and the Midwest are heavily forested regions, and they also have diverse landowners. So there are 172 million acres of forest land in our region, which is 42% of the land base. And there are 5 million different owners. And of that acreage, 74% is privately owned. So our organization provides climate services in the forest and natural resource sectors, such as climate assessments, practical resources, and technical assistance. So I think probably everybody has joined at this point. So if you would like to take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat box, we would love to get to know you better. So you can enter your name, your organization, and where you're calling in from today, if you would like. All right, and then if we want to go ahead and jump into today's agenda, we'll basically be starting out today with welcome, introductions, and course overview, as well as information on the adaptation workbook, and we'll be doing some explanations on step 1, as well as the assignment that you guys have completed and your work for this week. All right, next slide.
So Kristen, I can jump in here because this is one that I added to the slide deck without telling you. So basically with this slide, I just wanted to recognize what we're all feeling here in that climate change introduces this uncertainty about our future conditions, and all of this uncertainty and all the projected changes that we're hearing from the science modeling is really challenging our traditional expectations of ecosystem management now over the next couple of decades and throughout the next century. And we know that ecosystems will change in response to these rapidly changing conditions in ways that create habitat shifts for species and wildlife and changing ecosystem species assemblages. These changes are going to affect our fundamental ecosystem processes like nutrient cycling and water cycling, and even how we interact with the land as people. Basically, climate change is making it more difficult to do the work that we have all set out to do. And we know that the climate is changing, and we know that it's a big problem. And the idea of climate change can seem really big and complex and hard to handle. And so this course is all about trying to make it easier on you. So I'll turn it back over to you, Kristen.
Okay, thanks. All right, so what did you sign up for in this course? Let's dig into some of those details. So this course was designed to help professionals integrate climate change considerations into real-world natural resource projects. Some of the benefits of participating in this course will be identifying local climate change impacts, challenges, and opportunities, and we'll be developing specific actions to adapt to changing conditions. And by the end of this course, you will each have your own climate-informed project plan. And we'll also be offering information on how you can better communicate with stakeholders on the topics of climate change and climate adaptation. And as a bonus, you will have access to post-training support from the instructors during your project planning and implementation stages. All right, so I want to establish some expectations for the course up front. First, we will expect you to attend all 7 lectures and discussion sessions. And so we'll be meeting each week on Tuesdays We will have 1 week off. That'll be the week of March 16th. And you can find all of the session dates and times in the course syllabus. And I think Patricia is putting that link into the chat as well. So typically we'll be keeping our lectures to about 30 minutes, although we do expect that this first lecture might take a little bit longer since we have some more introductory information that we need to cover. And typically we will have our discussion sessions immediately following the lecture, and that will consist of interactive activities and group discussion, as well as some live support sessions. And so in addition to the live sessions that we're having each week, there will also be outside assignments that will guide you through the new material and the corresponding sections of the adaptation workbook, which could include supplementary videos, links to additional resources, and opportunities for reflection and commentary. And participants each week will be assigned various steps from the adaptation workbook to complete in the intervening days between live sessions. And so each week you can expect those outside assignments to take somewhere in the range of 2 to 4 hours to complete. All right, so continuing education credits. This course is eligible for 20 Category 1 continuing forestry education credits by the Society of American Foresters. So what you will need to do if you're interested in getting those credits, just send us an email to let us know. It'll be up to you to keep track of your own attendance throughout the course. So keep note of the dates that you're attending the lecture and discussion. And then at the end of the course, we will help everyone fill out the necessary paperwork, and we will present you with a certificate of completion for your records. And if there are any other professional organizations that you're interested in receiving credits through, just let us know and we can do some research and see if they would be suitable for this course. Okay, next slide. All right, and so another advantage of this course is access to your classmates. So feel free to reach out to them to collaborate or share ideas. Also feel free to reach out to us as well. We're happy to provide additional resources and ideas. And the slide that's up now is showing the course materials in your workbook. This is an image of the adaptation workbook online. And you can see there the session dates are posted. All right, next slide. All right, so our course expectations, please be fully engaged during the course sessions, close your emails, make sure that your homework is completed by noon on the Monday before our next class. And if you know that you'll have busy times during this course, be sure to work ahead. And if you have any questions, you can check out the course syllabus and you might find your answer there. All right, next slide. All right, so feel free to collaborate with classmates, share what ideas you're coming up with, things that you're struggling to figure out, as well as your successes. And of course, as always, feel free to reach out to your course instructors as well. Are there any questions at this point?
Okay, well, I will take it from here. I think you all might be wondering what then is climate adaptation? So we talked about how the climate is changing and how there are multiple layers of uncertainty, how there are changes projected, big and small. And we have pretty good resources that describe our vulnerabilities for the state of Ohio and for the Northeast in general. And because we have this information, we can then focus on our time here on how to cope with the climate change impacts in natural resource planning. And I'm getting a note that my audio is that really annoying, problematic.
I think you're good right now,
I don't
Patricia.
hear anybody responding, so okay. All right, so adaptation can mean many things to many people. So we just want to take a minute and for the natural resource planning crowd, define adaptation as the adjustment of natural systems in response to climate change. In many ways, adaptation actions will build on our sustainable forest management and conservation that we're already doing. And much of what we're already doing also makes good sense as a response to climate change. But actions can only be called adaptation when they intentionally address climate change impacts and vulnerabilities in order to meet our goals and objectives. And every landowner is different. So what adaptation looks like for you might not look like your neighbor's adaptation plan. We're all coming from very different places in terms of what we value looks like and the management history of the land there. And even if we did all start with the same conditions, we would probably all have very different management goals and objectives. And the resources that we have to manage our lands vary greatly depending on how well we're funded, what rules our organization might have that we need to follow. So even though we're all taking this course together, it's important to embrace our differences because there's no single solution. There's no one size fits all answer that's going to work for everybody. And that's really where we're coming from in our approach to adaptation and the Adaptation Workbook. So what is the Adaptation Workbook? The workbook is just one tool in a set of resources designed to help land managers integrate climate change into natural resource planning. This workbook was originally Climate Change Tools and Approaches for Land Managers. We call it the FAR for short. So the FAR has a lot in it, and we'll primarily use two parts for this course. One is the Adaptation Workbook as an online tool. And we'll also use the strategies and approaches, and those come into play during the fourth step of the workbook. And the workbook, of course, is now digital and contains links to the strategies and approaches online, but the FAR document actually contains a lot more detail and context. And so your homework for this week is to review a couple sections of it and really see how much more detail is there if you choose to review that level of detail. And the FAR is an adaptive management process and a decision support tool in the form of a step-by-step workbook. And then vulnerability assessments and the adaptation strategies and approaches, which were also designed with your needs in mind. They're quick and easy resources that really focus on what you need when you need it. And the FAR was designed to be flexible enough to accommodate all of our diverse goals and land ownership types. And it really centers on the expertise of managers and your judgment. And the intention of this tool is to help folks clarify and articulate how they've intentionally considered climate adaptation in their management plans. As a rule, the workbook does not make any recommendations, and your instructors will not be making any recommendations either. Instead, this tool creates a platform for managers to take credit for the good work already being done, and it creates an opportunity for you to recognize new approaches to dealing with climate change threats and vulnerabilities, and to design your own specific actions that are going to address your own problems or your own challenges, I guess I should say. So the workbook is a structured process, but it is flexible. It's designed to work from a variety of perspectives. And the central idea is to just break down the plan, really going to allow us to take the time and give us the space to breathe as we move through each step. So first, we're defining our management goals and what we're trying to do and where we're starting from in our project. And then we can assess the climate change impacts and vulnerabilities that are expected to manifest in the places where we work. And then in step 3, we're looking at how our ability to meet our management goals and objectives are really impacted by those climate change vulnerabilities. And then in step 4 is where we identify those adaptation actions that we can take to address those challenges. And then finally in step 5, we identify how we're going to keep track of our progress as we work toward our management goals and objectives while implementing these adaptation actions. So in short, the workbook helps folks account for their climate change risks, and it connects the dots between vulnerability and action, right? That's the purpose of all of this. And filling out the workbook also provides a written record of how you considered climate change, weighing the pros and the cons of your management decisions. And ultimately, we hope you develop a climate-informed management plan as a result of this course. So as you fill out the online workbook, the workbook can be edited even after the course is over with, and you can make new ones for different projects. You can share them with colleagues and stakeholders, and you can continue updating them. And eventually, we hope to get you to a place where you don't have to use the adaptation workbook anymore. It's just ingrained into your decision-making processes as you think about land management. So one cool thing is that a lot of people have used the workbook so far. We have over 425 projects and even beyond this map that I'm showing you. And your projects will add to that number even further. These 425 projects were developed both in person at workshops that we've been putting on, and then also in the online course. And there are now a couple of hundred of these projects summarized online as adaptation demonstrations, which are just meant to give you an idea of what adaptation looks like for different regions, for different landowner types, for all who have, different goals and objectives. And you'll see a huge range of critical vulnerabilities that people are looking at, and also the adaptation actions selected to address those vulnerabilities. So each of these projects was once in your shoes, starting out at step number 1 and trying to make sense of all of this. So I've curated a few examples from Ohio and Indiana that we've listed in the course syllabus if you want to check those out. Each demonstration project is just a couple of minutes of reading, so feel free to explore as many as you'd like. So this is what the website looks like to find these adaptation demonstrations. And you can click on any one of these dots and you can go to a page that describes exactly what they did in that project. You can also apply different filters to search for all private land examples or all federal examples or all Ohio examples. You can apply a state filter, so you can really pick and choose what kinds of demonstrations you're looking for. And if you happen to have a really tricky problem that you would like, you said, you know, if there's any way I could look at an example of how someone else has tackled this problem, and you're not seeing it in the adaptation demonstrations, let me know, because I might be able to remember a project that has faced a similar project, and I can look that up and say. So this toolkit, an example of how land managers are coping with and intentionally responding to climate change. So find out, you know, look at some of these stories on the website, and let us know if you want more information. So just go ahead and click on a dot. And so let's get started. Let's get started with the adaptation workbook at step 1. And before we dive into the rest of the slides, I wanted to actually share a screen with you. So if you can see the adaptation workbook on my screen now, this is my project dashboard. You can see I've got a couple of projects, example projects that I've already created here. Now, when you create an account online, you're going to get to this page and you won't have any projects, but you'll see this orange button right here that says add a project. And so hopefully you've all created your accounts so far, but you haven't added a project yet. So click on add a project, and then you're going to see this pop up, and it says a project for adaptation planning and practices, Ohio Forests, Farms, and Natural Lands. And you're going to want to click on that one. And that's how we're going to link your project to the online course that we're teaching. If for any reason you want to start another project that you're not taking through this course, then you could just choose a standard project, and then it won't be linked to the course. But for today's purposes, when you begin your step number 1, go ahead and click on that Ohio Farms and Forests. So, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Line, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Not getting any confirmation.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Can, okay, great. Okay, great. Sorry about that. So let's.
Before we get started, I have a question. My project partner is on the line today and going through the course with me. And so how do we manage like that she could see the workbook and I can see the workbook, but we're not duplicating efforts?
So yeah, that's a great question. What you're going to want to do is set up your account using one email address and one shared password, and then you can use that as a common login for everybody to access the same project. That's a great question. And then, yeah, if you just want to coordinate amongst yourselves, you know, who's working on what part of the project, you can do that. I can also send you some Word document versions of each step. If you want to share documents, email them back and forth and gather information before you put them into the adaptation workbook, I can do that for you as well. So great questions. Any other questions? Okay, so let's keep going. So this week we're working on step 1 of the adaptation workbook. So step 1 is really just the same. Can you see my slides? I hope you can see my slides. Let me know if you can't.
No,
What's that?
no, we can't see your slides.
Okay, I did lose connection, so let me try to share my screen again. Okay. I think I was saying step 1 is really just the same as setting up any other management project. So we want to define our location, our project, our time frames, and then we want to define our management goals and objectives. Started your step number 1 worksheets. I reviewed a few of those and they're looking really great. And so this week, you're just going to be working on refining those worksheets, you know, really creating a manageable project that you're excited about. And then you're going to transfer those step 1 worksheets into the adaptation workbook. So we asked all of you to bring a real world project to focus on in this course. So bringing a project that you're super familiar with can help provide focus for you and help set the context when you're thinking about then those climate change effects on your landscape. So ideas such as a management plan, a stewardship plan, a farm lot that you're working on, or some other effort that you've really got your hands on. And remember, this course is designed to teach you how to integrate climate change into your plans. So we don't want you to overcomplicate the process with a complex project. You can always go back and build more complexity into a project, but hitting that sweet spot of simplicity for the adaptation workbook course is really going to help you get through the course without getting too overwhelmed. So it's important that you pick a project that isn't so big that it's overwhelming and it's not so small that you have nothing to say. It's really a balance to find a project that's the right fit for the course. The course goes than you think it will. And so the simpler the project is, conceptually, even if it's a big acreage, you can have just 1 or 2 forest types, but still have a big acreage. Or you might have a small acreage with, you know, 3 or 4 forest types. You know, it's really a sliding scale and it's really all about what you can manage through each step of the workbook. From past courses, we found that projects that are on the scale of around 20 acres to a few hundred acres work well for this course. You know, even 5 acres works well for this course. But we've had projects that have gone up to 500 acres, but they've all been, you know, a pretty homogeneous type of forest or natural resource. So those work just fine too. So you might think of a forest stewardship plan for a private woodlot, a management plan for a few stands or compartments, one particular timber sale, one farm lot or pasture or farmland complex. And so the trick again is to really find that balance where you have 1 or a few forest types and a handful of objectives for each. We really don't want you to have 20 different objectives that you're looking at. So you might want to think about if you have several large goals for several project areas and you have no more than a dozen objectives for the entire project, that might be a good spot to focus on. So if you're struggling with these ideas and you're not sure you're hitting the right level of detail, just give us a call, email us, and we are happy to provide some pointers or help you rearrange some things. So again, this is if you have a project where you're looking at some complexity, that's probably what you're going for. You know, you're eating pie, but you're eating the same. You're eating maybe 2 different kinds of pie. Insanely complex would be, you know, bringing pizza pie into it. You're really looking at geographies that are too huge and complex, or you're looking at objectives that are too vague to really quantify. And then, you know, maybe the right level of complexity is just one piece of pie for you. It might be a little too simplistic, but it would serve as a good starting point in order to learn the adaptation workbook process. So you might be looking for, again, that 1 to 2 goals, a handful of objectives, and then really tangible time frames. So 5 to 10 years out, 10 to 20 years out, whatever that is, something simple. It's not saying you can't go with something a little more complex, but we would warn you to prioritize certain goals and objectives or certain ecosystem types, so that if you do start to get overwhelmed later in the process, you can cut back a little bit and then still finish with your high priority area. So think about that if you do want to include it, you definitely want to finish with. So now let's get specific. So splitting up your project area into management topics can help you split up the property into bite-sized pieces. So here we're talking about creating different management units. And each management unit is going to offer some additional focus and be important in its own way and different enough from another unit so that you have these different units. So for example, you might use something like a riparian forest, and it's 1 unit. And that unit will have its own set of goals and management objectives. It's also ecologically distinct so that when you get to step 2, the climate change impacts and vulnerabilities are going to be different in that riparian area than it will be, for example, in your other management unit, which might be a prairie unit. So it's distinct in the vegetation and then in the location. And then it's also distinct in that you can kind of anticipate that the climate change impacts might be a little bit different between those 2 areas. And in that way, as we go through the rest of the adaptation workbook, you'll find that it's really easy to keep things in different compartments. And so your management units, they can be based on different features of the sites. They can be based on the ecology of the systems, or it can be based even on different topics like wildlife habitat or ephemeral ponds. So you can think about your ecosystem components as separate features if they are highly important priorities in your management plan. But you might not want to include them if it's just adding, you know, again, a little bit more complexity to your project that you might have a hard time finishing. And so as you begin step number 1, you'll define your management units, and the workbook online has predefined land uses that are going to pre-populate for you if you're working in a forest ecosystem. So as you go into step 1, the more you can align your management units with these predetermined forest types like beech maple or oak hickory forest types, you'll be able to put those in a bin that will then pre-populate climate change vulnerabilities and impacts for you. So if you don't have a forest-centered project, then that's totally fine too. You just have to invent your own custom management units. And when we get to the part where we identify impacts and vulnerabilities, we'll just bring in information from resources that we've already laid out in the syllabus for you. So no worries there. So this is what it will look like in the adaptation workbook. So again, when you get to filling out the workbook, this is what it looks like. As you can see, so I added my project, and then it's you close these little windows. These will be drop downs when you first land on this page, and it will contain all the information you need to complete this step. So you just click on those arrows and minimize them, and then it will ask you to define your forest or management types. And so for a forest project, you would then click, you know, northern hardwood, central hardwood pine, montane spruce fir. We don't actually have that in this region, but so there'll be different forest types that are relevant to Ohio that you click on, and then you will add a custom management type down here. And those of you that are doing the straight agriculture project, you will see your own button here to add custom management topics as well. And then when you click on adding a custom ecosystem management, you just add your title here. Whoops. Add your title here, so name it. It could be prairie, you could say, you know, pasture land on the back 40, whatever it is. And then you want to really add a little bit of detail about, you know, what's the vegetation there, you know, maybe some information about the size of the unit, you know, maybe the soils type, and whatever else you think is important to really defining that ecosystem type. And then you can click save. Most of the adaptation workbook is going to automatically save for you, but wherever you do need to save, it's going to be these places where you're adding custom information. And then once you choose your management topics or insert them on your own, the next panel is going to show the units that you selected. And they'll just bring them over for you. They'll show up right here. So this is how it's organized. And then for each of these project areas, you will click on those to input your management goals and objectives. So just a reminder on management goals and objectives, you know, we've had you work on these prior to this class, so hopefully you've got a good start on that. We want you to have at least one goal for each management topic and 1 or 2 objectives for each management topic, so you don't have to get crazier than that. And then for the purposes of the workbook, a goal is a broad statement that's not measurable. It's your overall vision or desired condition. They're broad general statements that express a desired state or process to be achieved. So it could include desired future ecosystem conditions, habitat characteristics, forest products, or other services. And these are often not attainable in the short term, and they provide the context for more specific objectives. So They're kind of your big ideas, your hopes and dreams. It might be something like, the goal is to restore a watershed, or to restore floodplain connectivity, or to transition a field to a forest. So those are big, lofty ideas that you would write down as goals. And then your objectives are much more specific. These are the ones that you want to make measurable and quantifiable. And these are directly connected to your goals. So they're more concise statements of planned results that correspond to these pre-established management goals and help to achieve an outcome. So objectives often include information on the resources that might need to be used to form the basis for future planning. Or they might include details that define the precise steps to be taken in order to achieve an identified goal. And then just a reminder, this SMART acronym is just really a great tool to remember. Make it SMART, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Objectives are SMART. So a couple of examples here. Your management goal, if your broad management goal is to enhance habitat conditions in a northern hardwood forest, then your management objective might be diversity through a series of forest harvests over 20 years. So this is about the right level of detail because it indicates a direction of action without being too prescriptive. And by too prescriptive, we mean you might not want to get down to the detail of, conducting timber stand improvement on 10 acres to be released every 5 years. So that might be just a little too specific. And then too broad would be promote resiliency of tree species. It's really unclear what resiliency even means. So you would need to define that. And in defining that, you might actually get to the right level of what an objective should be. So you can kind of think of figuring out objectives being like Goldilocks. We want to find the one that's just right. And this is just another example. I'll skip over that. So here are some good things to keep in mind now that we've briefly gone over step number 1. Our goal here is to build resilience to climate change, and that can get really circular. So we want to continue to promote the benefits of the forest into the future through adaptation without making adaptation specifically one of our goals. So we want to use goals and objectives that we already have. So timber production, wildlife habitat, simple conservation and preservation. And the climate change adaptation is going to come out as a result of the adaptation workbook. So sometimes we get folks that come in and their goal is to create a climate-informed management plan, and that's fine. But again, we really need to specify what are the goals and objectives of the land that you're working on so that we can get you there. And again, that's going to be, whatever you're working toward as a land agency. So hopefully that gives you a little more clarity on how to get step number 1 done. We're hoping that you can accomplish this by next Monday. Next Monday at noon would be great, and it will give us a chance to review your step number 1s in the adaptation workbook. And then we're hoping that you will come to Tuesday's session ready to share a little bit about your project and what are those major goals and objectives and timeframes that you're working in. So your assignment course syllabus. There was a link to that in the newsletter that I sent out. I will send out a newsletter every week after class is over, and that will contain links to information that we talked about. It will contain a link to the recorded session if you happen to miss a session and need to catch up, and it will contain other information. And just so you don't get overwhelmed by all the information we're sending out, all of it is redundant with what you're going to see in the adaptation workbook and in the syllabus. So it's not anything new that you have to keep track of. We're hoping it's just another way that you can quickly access that information. So complete step 1 before next week, and then please fill out the homework section following step 1. The homework section shouldn't take too long on any given week. These are mainly questions about what you're doing to accomplish a step, and then also how you feel about the course information. We're actually going to use your homework to feel how you're doing in the course and adjust our content moving forward so that we can really give you the information that you need. And we realized that we have been talking the whole class period for step number 1, but that's just because it's our first class. Next week, we're moving more into a format where we're going to have that 30 minutes of lecture and then 30 minutes of discussion time. And we're hoping that, you know, you keep your videos on so that we can see what's going on, you can see each other, and then you can have great conversations with each other and share a lot about what you're struggling with or what major successes you're identifying. So hopefully we're building a small community of practice here in Central Ohio where, you know, throughout this course and afterwards, you can really lean on each other and use each other as resources. And then if you have any questions at all, there are video tutorials in the adaptation workbook. They're found at every step. The course materials contains a link to the adaptation workbook cookbook tutorial that provides a detailed diagram of each step of the adaptation workbook. So if you get lost, you know, I know this can seem like a lot of information. Go check out those tutorials. And then your best friend is going to be this gray navigation panel on the side of your adaptation workbook. If you're in step 1, defining your management topics, and you want to skip ahead to see what step 2 looks like, you can simply click on step 2 and it will take you there. You might get a warning that you haven't completed step 1 yet, but you can still see what it looks like. And equally, you know, if you're on step 3 and you want to go back and look at something else, or you're just simply lost in the navigation, that's what this panel is for. And then one other thing I want to point out is in this gray navigation panel, you see this resources tab here. If you click on that, it's going to pull down all the resources that we mention as well. So links to the strategies and approaches, the vulnerability assessments, and everything else that you need in order to complete these steps. So if you need to access something quickly, you can also just click on that resources tab, and I think much of it will be found there. And then lastly, please don't hesitate to reach out to your instructors. As part of this course, we're going to provide an opportunity where an instructor will email you to check in on you and see if you're having any issues or want to bounce some ideas around. But you don't have to wait for us to reach out to you. You can reach out to us and we will make time to help you out. So looking ahead, our next lecture is next Tuesday, March 2nd. We will be going over your answers to step number 1, and then we will launch into a overview of how to do step number 2. So be prepared to give us a quick synopsis of your project and let us know in there about an optional video next week. And we're trying to put together some custom content. So that's just a teaser for now, and we'll provide more information on that next week. So with that, we're all going to stick around. Lecture is officially over, but we're all going to stick around and answer any questions that you might have. So stay with us if you would like to.